I'm Seema Rao, Deputy Director of the Akron Art Museum, and I am joined by...
I'm Ronald Jackson, and I've been invited to join this talk, so I'm here and glad to be here.
Oh, we are so excited. We have lived with your work, and we chose, for a lot of reasons, to hang the work in a salon style. One, because we wanted so much joy and delight, but one of the things I didn't think about, sadly, we had to curate the show digitally. And usually most museums work with mock-ups, and even we didn't even use minis. Most museums have little rooms that we put little pictures in, and we had to do it by SketchUp. I didn't realize that your work would be in my life. I look at the figure almost 3 times a day, 3 times a day sometimes. You know, I just walk by her, and I've had so many people just almost look the figure in the face. And so I'm thrilled to have you. You're also surrounded by these figures, so you just live your life with these with so many people, right?
Yeah, I normally have I probably have about 30 faces in my studio, and every morning when I come in the studio, they're each asking for me to work on them because they're mostly all unfinished, and it's kind of a decision for me. Is, okay, do I stop what I was working on last night and start something else or continue? But yeah, I've been working mostly portraits the last 3 years, and I will be moving beyond the portraits somewhat this year into more narrative types of works.
Well, I'd love to hear about narrative, but let's go back to one thing you said, because I just wanted to kind of like bring that out a little bit. So we've had many conversations with artists of all media. The exhibition has quite a number of media represented, and we hear different ways of working. And you said something that I think is interesting, because I don't know that we've had somebody recently who talked to us about the fact that you might be working on different works at this concurrently. It's like having 4 books open at the same time.
Maybe. I never work on one work at a time. I work on multiple ideas together. You know, they're closely tied, and I have this creative mantra that states, my first great idea is never my best idea. And with understanding that is I come up with an idea that I'm inspired by or excited about, and I immediately go to the canvas and start seeking to bring it to life. But then I hit a pause, a place in which I haven't figured everything out, and then I have to sit back. So it's inevitable that I am going to have to make adjustments, slightly change things, and when I get in that spot, I shift to something else, work on it, and then those ideas either come from the other work, or I think so. It's easy for me to get going on 5 or 6 or 7 different projects.
I think that would surprise our visitors, because one of the conversations I often have with people, if I'm just sort of standing in the galleries and I say, oh, what are you thinking? You know, is because a lot of people have noted how precise it feels. It feels like it was in your mind, it came to the surface, finished. And I think there's a high level of polish to it from far away, particularly. And what I love is the way in our work, particularly, I say to people when they say that, I say, you know, well, let's look at the hair, because the hair is so painterly in the one that we have on view. And I'm curious, so what is your interest in the level of the surface and the finish and the brush strokes? How do you think about those?
Well, I have painted in a number of different ways over the past several years. And I find myself observing different paintings or artwork, and I appreciate different ways of painting, and I try to instead of being known for painting a certain way, I like to incorporate different elements. And sometimes there may be an element like the masks are generally flat instead of formed around the face. And it presents an idea or a look that may be a little more illustrative sometimes. And then other parts may be more painterly or whether it's thin paint or thick layered paint using a palette knife or a brush. And I just like to incorporate any of those methods to create an interesting image.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have an interest in illustration, even though I've never really considered myself making illustration art. So there are some elements that can be kind to like illustration in some of my paintings, and others more.
I could see that. I could see that. I mean, in ours, but then you have one that I love. I love the ones that you have that have like shrubbery behind it, bushes behind it.
Right.
It feels like there's stories in it. I've had a lot of people say, oh, she's looking, and I said she's with me. I mean, I think of the figure that we have as being a person who has a story. And I do, I mean, I think it's worth, saying what sort of where did our figure come from? What is the story behind ours?
Well, yes, that is the primary focus of my work, is that the individuals have a story, and the mask is something that I've learned that has become a tool that suggests to the viewers that there's a story to be discovered. There's something about this person that is more than just the aesthetic or the image, and it's something for the viewer to inquire about. And for me, all of the subjects of my portraits are about stories of representing individuals from the past, and the over the 3 years that I've been working with these works, the story has been centered around African Americans of the past that were largely living in the South, the Southern states, during the time where they were contemplating being a part of the Great Migration, of whether to move from the South, start a life and pursue a life in another part of the country. And there is a number of stories that lead to those decisions of whether to leave or whether to stay in the South. And outside of the greater narrative of the struggle of African Americans being living in the South prior to the 50s or 60s or around that time, the greater narrative is about the struggle living under a Jim Crow society and what that meant. But I want to invite the viewer to speculate what the more personal stories are. They were people of that time. They were people that had dreams, had aspirations. They laughed, they loved, they did a number of things outside of just seeking to be liberated from a unfavorable situation. So what were those personal stories? And that's what I am trying to entice the viewer to say, okay, what's the story here? And with each painting, I kind of desire to lead a person into just using their imagination. But for the work that I have in the museum, it is a reference to a sister, my sister, one of my sisters. I'm the youngest of 11 kids,
Wow.
and
Wow.
my
God bless your family.
yeah,
It was always exciting at your house, I guess.
right. I have a sister that passed when she was young, like 28 years old, and my memories of her was she was the sister that she was gorgeous woman, and she strutted around, as far as my memory, with this big blonde afro. And for me, as a young kid, I didn't know whether that was natural, or I thought because she looked different, she was different, and to me, she was I associate her uniqueness with her hair. So that was a nod to my memory of my sister.
It's a wonderful memorial to her. I have to say, you know, I obviously knew that that story, but before we had known the story, we had already really wanted that work for the show, because the presence, it is somebody who, she is somebody, the work is just like, you look at it and you're like, this is a person I want to know. It's you want to know this person's story. We've had so many people talk about her, and I think it's interesting, you know, as an Ohioan, the Great Migration certainly affected us as well. I mean, I think a lot of people in urban Ohio, particularly, and the urban Rust Belt. So we also have artists from Detroit and Pittsburgh in the show, because we really tried to think about sort of our region, who are very impacted. And we knew about your how these works tie to the Great Migration. The Great Migration is an important part of Ohio history, and it really shaped a lot of urban Ohio. So for our visitors, I don't know if they know those things. I think that they just resonate with it, because along with these personal stories, there's an interesting sort of, what I find sort of fascinating is that the works also have an interesting universality by the mask. So the mask makes you want to know more about the person, but it also in some ways makes the person any person you might know.
Right. It's it introduces a possible dialogue between the viewer, speculating stories in my works are mainly about stories. I had a collector that we were talking, lives in LA, but originally from Chicago. And I was talking to him about, you know, things I like to talk about regarding how the Great Migration not only impacted the Ohio region, but the nation.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, Harlem Renaissance, you know, and just all over the country. So I was talking to him, and I asked him, it's like, okay, where are your people? Where are your people from? And he's like, oh, Chicago. We're in LA. It's like, no, where are they from? And it caused him to think, and he's like, they're from Mississippi. And there were reasons, there were situations, choices that were made that caused individuals to decide to move from where they are to the other regions. And there are epicenters of people or communities of, say, African-American communities around the country, where they claim and proudly announce or declare that, hey, I am Brooklyn raised, Brooklyn born. I'm Oakland raised, Oakland born. I'm there, this and that. But there were decisions and stories and things that caused their great grandparents or relatives to allow them or cause them to be Brooklyn born or Oakland born and raised, or Kansas City or wherever that may be. And I I think that is an interesting story over the course of several decades that shaped the communities and different places around the country in regards of the Black experience.
So I mean, I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about it, because I think for a lot of people who hear about the Great Migration, they hear from the Brooklyn-born people, the Chicago-born people. But where are you seated right now?
I am in Virginia. Is where I live and work. I grew up in Arkansas.
Right.
And
so you have a different look at the Great Migration on some level.
Right. But I know that my family, based on that, the typical migration routes from different locations, the Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee areas would move up a corridor to the St. Louis, the Chicago, Indiana's, and up further to Milwaukee, and I experienced that as a child. My parents' siblings, they would come from Chicago down home to Arkansas to visit their roots, and I also know other parts of Arkansas and parts of Louisiana would migrate out west, and they established those communities in Oakland and moving to LA, as would the Carolinas and the Florida groups would migrate up to Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and up on to New York. So that where they were in the South dictated where they were likely to end up in other parts of the country, and that was mainly because of the rail routes.
Yeah, right.
And after that, it was, we have so many people or friends that have moved up there, and we migrate naturally that way. So it's an interesting story, but I think more interesting are the people, the individuals that made those decisions and why they were making those decisions.
I love the word roots that you said. One, because I think your work has a lot of sort of pattern and floral imagery, so it kind of resonates with your work. But the other thing it makes me think of is something I've noticed when people look at the work. They really engage with the figure, but as a portrait. And I constantly think about what's the works in the show. There's other works that are hung with it, where I find it like you're creating if I look at your room right now, if I look at the body of work and this figure that's in the show, that they're sort of like a new way to look at old history. That there is a history that we maybe didn't share as well as we could have in our history books, and you're telling that history in a different, better way, maybe. And I love it. I want to sort of switch gears a little bit to hear a little bit more about you. You've had sort of your biography. You didn't have a straight route to college, art school, gallery. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where we are right now.
Well, my interest coming out of high school, of course, throughout my childhood, art, drawing specifically was something that entertained me, and living in a rural community, not in the city, you needed something to entertain yourself, and I became known as being talented, so to speak, in that way. So not having much exposure to what art was or what it can be, I thought that my natural course of a vocation after high school was architecture, and I moved to California, started pursuing that, and I didn't complete the architectural program before I decided to join the military. I was married young and needed to pursue a career. So I chose to try the military, try that out, and I ended up staying, making a full career out of it. But I did leave the military after 10 years, just for a brief time. When during that time, I realized that I needed, it would probably be best for me to pursue art as a post-military career, because I was into IT, telecommunications, and that thing, and I was going to pursue that after the military. And I had an epiphany that caused me to focus on my childhood interests, of which I was dabbling still as an adult. So I re-entered the military after 10 years being in the military, and I was going to use that 10-year time of me to complete 20 years as an opportunity to just teach myself or become a self-taught artist, because I couldn't attend art school while serving in the military. So I did everything that I knew to improve technically as an artist, and also to learn more about the industry and what it meant in being an artist. So that was, yeah, an unconventional route to becoming an artist. But
So when you say you did everything you could to be a better artist, what were some of those things?
Well, one of the things that I did first is recognize that I needed a lot of development in my skill set, being an artist. But one of the things I did was I would subscribe to a number of art publications. I would have several publications coming in the mail every month that would, one, motivate me looking at other works, but also publications like American Art Collector, Art News, and just inform me about what was going on in the world of art, because I was learning from within a bubble where no one around me was in that space or had anything to offer. So I've over the years have collected stacks of magazines that would from the floor to, several
The
feet,
Stonehenge of magazines.
several hundreds
Yes.
of magazines that I would read through every month and learn about artists that were doing things, artists from history, basically learning for myself art history and different ones of today that are doing things. So that introduced me to another understanding of how far art can go as far as what could be considered art. So that was one of the main things.
So this is a theme that we have in almost every conversation we have with the artists, which is one, that being an artist is actually a lot of times looking at other people's art and doing, really becoming as knowledgeable as you can about the field. And then the other is that you practice and practice and practice. And I think that is something I love to remind everybody who listens, that some people sort of think, oh, he was born that way. Like he was just talented as a painter. And so many of our artists remind everybody that art is really a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. And I just love to always sort of second that.
One thing I would add, I'm probably it's probably a good thing that Instagram wasn't around when I was working, and just working. I would be deployed in Iraq, and I'm working. I'm painting. You know, we're in tents, and then in trailers. I'm painting. I'm drawing, and from 2001, where I started pursuing this intent of becoming an artist, it was 9 years before I ever presented my work to the public. From 9 years of working, of course, you know, people around me saw what I was doing, but I never entered a show or presented my work publicly for 9 years, and it was at a regional juried show at a small gallery in which I got the best of the show. So if Instagram was around, I would have been tempted to post and share a number of my early works, and yeah, that could have not been encouraging. Yeah.
I wonder what, I was curious, those people in the tents, you know, your friends who were with you, or your colleagues who were with you, I should say, what did they think of the stuff you were making in those tents and in those trailers?
Well, it's in the military. People have various hobbies, things that they like to do, but from the military community, it's not a place that inspired creativity. So in that way, it was often fairly unique to find someone that was engrossed into creating art. When I was in Korea for a year, I had an apartment, and my apartment was, of course, I was there by myself for that year without my family. My apartment was overrun with canvases, paintings. I had paper palettes, paper plates, probably hundreds, that's all over the floor, and people would come into my apartment and gasp. It's like, okay, what is going on? I had a studio place in one room, a storage place in another room, my bedroom and everything else had canvases, and so it was quite different for any person, and especially my landlord, a lovely Korean lady that would come in, and it's like, who is this guy? So that's not something you would find typically within the military community. Maybe someone sketching, you know, but not transforming their whole environment, you know, to painting or art.
I mean, it's a testament, though, also to this idea for a lot of people who watch these. I think they want to be artists, but it's not as you. It was years and years in the making. You're not like nobody's an overnight success in some ways. That you have to, that you have to do it. I have to admit, I came to your work through your Instagram and now, and really love the work aesthetically and formally. And I think that the narratives, the implied narrative is quite there, and people, you know, you just want to make these stories for these figures. But then I read your history and saw that you had lived sort of worked all over the world. And I'm curious because your works have such an amazing all over color and pattern. If any things that you saw globally influenced you, like in the Middle East or in Asia?
Well, the influence from my travels is recognizing I would say central to the story that I'm portraying is inviting people to broaden their humanity. People go through different things. They experience, they suffer different things, but they all share the common desire to just just live a decent life. You know, most people are really desire to do good, you know, and just do well for their families and be kind to their neighbors. And in my travels, it just confirms that regardless of who the people are, their situation, they are commonly just genuinely good people. And that is something that has influenced me in my travels, is just taking the interest of speaking with different people about their life, even me having the opportunity to speak with Iraqis or Iraq, or however, you know,
Yes.
it's properly pronounced, and realize that they have the same desires as anyone else, and it should be allowed for everyone to have their honest you know, opportunities in life and in this world. So whether it's in Korea, I've taken opportunities to go out with a group of just Koreans, you know, and have a meal with them, whether in Italy and in Germany and in Belgium, Kuwait. It has, and when I was in Belgium, I was in a NATO unit, which allowed various cultures to come together and made friends where people are interesting and have different experiences. And that's something that I want us to look at a person that we do not know and contribute or suggest a narrative of them being just like you in so many ways. So
That's
that's
so,
my
I mean, that's so
experience.
wonderful, because it brings back to the beginning of this, sort of, we're talking about the figures and how you want us to kind of connect with them. And I said, I see her and I connect with them. It's true. So your work, all of these experiences you've had have created these people, have helped you create these people who anybody, including our visitors, can walk into our galleries and connect with the figure. So to end, we always like to end on a positive note.
All
What's
right.
something that's exciting to you, or something that you'd like to share that you're looking forward to?
Wow. I have 2022, I have some projects, mainly one, but they're all stemming around one project that I have to remain a certain level of secrecy.
Yes.
But
So we should look out. We should watch your social
right,
media.
but it will involve a great level of collaboration. So if there are some creative individuals out there that want to inquire, please do. If they may want to join me in some way, I can't share what the project is, but I will and am building a team of individuals that we're going to do something fairly large.
That's
So,
wonderful. And we have on our website, we have the links to all of Ronald's social, his Instagram. We keep talking about Instagram today, his website. So he is easy to find. So I look forward to everyone who's watching this, hopefully reaching out to him. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you so much for being in the show.
all right. Great. It was my pleasure.